Today we're going to be checking out the cheapest way you can get 24 gigabytes of VRAM in a dedicated machine. The machine that we're going to be using for this is an HP Z440. And this whole thing should come in under $750. And that's with two 3060 12GB GPUs. We're going to have a decent amount of RAM, and the processor that you can get for this has a wide variety of options. So we're also going to be looking at the electrical usage, the tokens per second that you could expect to get on various models. This will allow you to fit larger models and larger context windows. This is much cheaper than a rig that has quad 3090s in it, and VRAM is always king. No matter what, be sure you're always optimizing for whatever you can afford that's reasonable for VRAM, because that right there is going to be the biggest impact you have on your experience. At the end of this, we'll also check out the price on this, and I'll take you kind of shopping, and we'll look at what the spreadsheet looks like and some alternatives that you might want to consider. There are some limitations with the Z440, but this is actually not a very complex setup. Follow the guide that I produced recently on Proxmox and LXCs to get up and running with that. I also have one for Proxmox and Docker if you would prefer to go that route. Both of those in the channel history. Make sure to hit like and subscribe while you're down there. Big shout out and thanks to all of our channel members and subscribers. Let's get started. The Z440 can support quite a few different processors. The processor it comes with might be okay. Some of the lower core count but higher core thread single speeds might be better off for your inference needs. You also have 8 DIMM slots. This is awesome if you are looking for cheap ways to grow DDR4 in a system to a very large level. You don't have to go with the fastest DDR4 either. Actually, 2400 speed DDR4 would be perfectly fine in this setup. Now, we also have probably one of the things that workstations are very well known for, a lot of PCIe slots. As well, the Xeon chip supports lots of PCIe on the CPU itself. And with 2 full-size slots, that makes it really easy to put in things like 2 GPUs. This slot down here is an old school PCI slot, not PCIe. So you can just ignore that. This is a great slot also to cover up with a GPU. Your front USB 3 connector, I did have to unplug this just so I could get this in. And I mean, maybe you could make the USB 3 connector that is on here work. Maybe you could shave it down with an X-Acto or something. For a very cheap case and computer, a really quick way to get up and running. Basically, we were getting warnings about the front USB not being connected. So what I did here was use a jumper that I found on an old motherboard to connect 4 to 4. So that's 1, 2, 3 exposed, and then the 4th is bridged up to the 1, 2, 3 exposed, 4th there. If it comes with a 700 watt class power supply, which you want it to say 700 watt, and it says that right here on the little tag. As long as it comes with a 700 watt power supply, you're going to get 2 separate 6 pins, and these 2 separate 6 pins, each one of them can support 150 watt. Your 3060 12GB is technically 170 watt. You could limit that if you were concerned about it, but you're very, very unlikely to spike it up there for very long periods of time that would cause any sort of blip out or anything like that. Future options, if you wanted to get some inserts, some 5.25 inch to maybe 3.5 inch, or 2.5 inch, there's some options I'll drop that I have used and I think they're pretty cool. And this would allow this to have up to 6 SSD drives in one of these slots, which is pretty cool. As well, you've got some traditional slots right here that you can use for 3.5 inch drives, 6 SATA ports on this motherboard. I'm going to be using Evo 870s. You can pick these up really cheap now in the 1 terabyte range for around $50, and even in the 2 terabyte range for around $100. But yeah, you're going to end up with these 2 connections, and you're going to need to get 6-pin to 8-pin connectors, and I've got the links for these dropped below. Okay, so now that we've got those 2 ends connected, I'm going to go ahead and insert the GPUs here. You kind of have this little bar that slides down, so that thing can definitely get in the way. Be careful of it. Also, it has some sharp edges. I've cut myself on the inside of this case once already. All right, got number 1 in. And number 2 in. And we'll close that up So go ahead, plug in your power adapters for your GPUs. If you've gotten any extra RAM, make sure that you refer to the RAM population guide that's inside your Z440 workstation. Here, it also gives you diagnostics if you run into beeps or something like that, what you would need to check. So in our instance, RAM slot 1 and 2 are RAM slot 1 on the far side and RAM slot 2 on the far side. Might look a little bit weird at first, but definitely that is the correct configuration if you just have 2 DIMMs. For sure, if you're buying this on a used market, which eBay, great place to pick these up for really good prices. Also, Amazon has them for pretty cheap as well. Make sure you change out your thermal paste. It can be pretty old on the CPU. Now we're going to put in the fan cover, and it has a power connector that is oriented to go up here. So make sure you have the correct orientation on that. And it just kind of slides into the 2 arms that you'll clearly see it have supports built in for them, and just snap it on down and you're good. Seal it on up and that's it. We're ready to go. So let me walk you through the exact settings I've got in my BIOS so you can match those and not run into any problems. You can, if you're connected to the internet and you have a DHCP address, you can run a update for the BIOS. That might not be a bad thing to do, but I'm not actually really that concerned with it on mine. So yeah, you can do a system BIOS update if you want to. If it's very out of date, you might need to do that. I'm gonna leave that one up to you to decide. So over here is the important stuff. In advanced, if we go here, you can see that I've got pretty much the post delay set pretty low. I've also got fast boot disabled so I can see what's coming on the screen here. And I think this is, you know, some settings I found that worked. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't come like this. But make sure there is this one that you have here. This one's important. Enable legacy BIOS boot options. That way you can actually boot in on the Samsung SSD that is plugged in there. You can see I've got a 500 gigabyte one. So backing out of this, you can go to device configuration. I don't think that you have to do anything other than enable your ports that you want to enable, disable ports you don't want to have enabled, and make sure that you are in AHCI mode. Other than that, the rest of this should be pretty good to just leave as it, you know, kind of stock came. For your secure boot configuration, enable legacy support and disable secure boot is what I've got set here. For your power options, you can kind of do some extended runtime settings. This one might help you idle down a little bit better. And also runtime power management, having that enabled also. Your idle fan mode, you could set this if you wanted to. If you hear right now, it's gonna be a little bit noisy as it's in the BIOS, but as soon as we get out of the BIOS and into the operating system, it'll hand over and take control of that. As far as performance options, we're gonna have hyperthreading enabled. We've got disabled for PCIe performance mode, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and change that to enabled here. We'll take a little bit more wattage to make that happen, so keep that in mind. MMIO I have to auto, iSoC I have to enabled, and I do have all cores per processor enabled also. And as far as your slot settings, if you wanted to disable slots here, you would be able to do that. You don't necessarily need to do that. It's going to detect if you have something in there or not, so don't feel like you have to go and do any of that. Your graphics configuration, I've got this just set to my NVIDIA controller that is in slot 2. I think that's fine. It'll detect a GPU plugged in, and you do have to have a GPU plugged in. If you don't have a GPU plugged in, it's just going to beep at you and you won't be able to do anything. So make sure you have a GPU plugged in. So yeah, go through that. If you make any changes, save your changes. It should reboot, install. So next, we're going to install our USB drive and install Proxmox. So while I won't go through the entire setup and installation process with you, of course, you can follow that entire step-by-step guide over here on digitalspaceport.com and the written write-up guide with the accompanying video that I've got, local AI software, easy setup guide with Ollama and LXC in Proxmox. As you follow through that, we will hit one point where we will add the GPUs. And so we'll pick it up from there at this point. And so let me do an ls of dev /NVIDIA and asterisk. And you can see the devices named here. So we've got this path and then these two devices living inside there. That asterisk is not a valid device path. So device 0 is GPU 0 and GPU 1. We're going to pass these through to our LXC container just by grabbing that, coming over to the LXC container, go to your resources, add, pass through to dev NVIDIA 0 is the first one. And so at the end of adding in all of the devices, it should look like this. Now you're going to need to stop and restart to have this take effect. So log in really quick and do a apt update, just to see if there's anything you need to update. Doesn't look like it. And do a shutdown now. It'll power down. And then when we power it back on, the NVIDIA GPUs will be passed through. Go ahead, hit start. So now we need to start our container back up again after we have those devices pass through as resources, and you can see they'll change from kind of a yellowy color to this as soon as they get passed through. And over here on our shell, we are going to do a quick ls, copy the full path of this, and do pct push 100, paste in that, hit the right arrow, /root, paste the name again. This is pushing the driver into the container. So your container does need to be running for that to work. When you come back here, go ahead, log in, and do a quick ls. So next do a chmod +x and nv asterisk. Now go ahead and run ./nv asterisk -- no kernel modules. And that is because we're using the actual LXC does not use the its own kernel. It uses Proxmox kernel. So make sure you select the proprietary, as that's what we've installed already. And it'll go ahead and install here. It'll tell you about restarting X. You don't have a desktop environment installed, of course, so not needed. Now when you run nvtop, which you might need to apt install nvtop, you'll see that you've got your two 3060s with 12 gigabytes of VRAM each here installed. Super freaking awesome. Now we're ready to test out what the performance looks like on some of the models that we've got here. So we're going to start off by running just a kind of greeting, just saying hi to the LLM, getting an initial warm up. That's not the response tokens per second and prompt tokens per second I'm going to record, however. That's just to get it loaded, make sure everything's up and running. But it is maybe possibly interesting for you to see that on this one. 14 and about 11.5 for QWQ32B. And if you look over on the side here, I'm running something called HTOP. And with HTOP, you can kind of arrow over to the right and see the parameters that it's loading with. So you see we have 4096 loaded in as the CTX size, and parallel is 2. So this is what it is essentially running under the hood. If you come over here, you can see that we've got roughly about 85% of the memory taken up here. So we're going to do a new chat window here and quickly toss it, Armageddon with a twist. And I'm not really checking to see whether or not it gets this right. We're just checking to benchmark the performance and see how many tokens per second it can produce. So whatever it says, it really doesn't matter. But QWQ, I will say this, is one of the better models. And this is one of the primary reasons as a 32B that you're looking for a large amount of VRAM, because right now this is running all in VRAM. So all of this is fitting in that 84 to 85% of the GPUs. And if you see this, it says 100% in the GPUs, and the size that it's detecting is roughly 24 gigabytes. So that is pretty close to the estimation of about 86, 84. So you can see that creeping up just a little bit as it continues to burn through and churn into the context window. And we're just going to go directly to the response tokens per second. And those were at 11.92, and the prompt tokens per second were 1260. So not bad. So 11.92 and 1260. Let's toss that in over here. And you can see the information that I'm kind of capturing here is what was the CTX size on this. So we had 4096 on the CTX size, and the num parallel is something you set as a special environment variable. We're going to move on to Gemma 3 27B Q4, and we're just going to run this one at 2048. I don't know whether it's going to fit or not. So this is a good question. All right, so next up, we're going to check Gemma 3 27B. And you can see that the settings I've got here, since this is the 27 billion parameter, that's quite large, we're going to set the quant to 4, and I've just got the CTX set to 2048. I've been having some trouble getting this and drilling down into why. It's actually only using seemingly about 75% of the VRAM, but yet it is splitting still. That's a little bit of a bummer, and that definitely is going to slow things down quite a bit. And so there's got to be some settings somewhere that you can adjust that would make this a lot better, is my hope. Also, the GPU utilization looks surprisingly low here at about 16 to 15%, but you kind of start seeing that happen if you get into split mode. And of course, yeah, your tokens per second, much lower. So that's about 6 and 403. So drop your ideas in the comments below. Weird bug maybe. And I am on the latest of everything here, so it shouldn't be that I'm out of date on, and we're on 0.6.5, so that is quite new. Next, let's give Cogito a run here, and this is a 14 billion Q8, and that is kind of my favorite is Q8. You get a lot of additional options as far as decisions. So the evaluation of the next step is always on that next layer going to have about 256. I think it might actually be exactly 256 with a Q8. With a Q4, you have 16. So a lot more additional options to be considered by the model. And if you're looking at like full precision, well, that's like billions or something like that. It's kind of crazy. So let's just give it a quick warm up here and see if we can get this to reside completely in the GPU memory so that we don't have a slowdown. That is one goal that I'm trying to do. It looks like we're about under 10 gigabytes there, so that looks promising. So we got 17.52 tokens response back there and 16 on prompt. But like I said, we're only interested in running Armageddon with a twist to see how it degrades. And so let's do that here. Little bit bigger, and this can oftentimes take a little bit more time for an LLM to process. So more tokens burned can kind of demonstrate also what the capacity you're going to be eating into as far as extra VRAM, because it can grow throughout time a little bit. And it looks like we have 16.68 response tokens per second and 1,558 prompt tokens per second. Is that 1,208? 1,558. Not even close. And next we're going to move up to Gemma 3, but this Gemma 3 is different because it's a Q8 Gemma 3. That means we're going down on the parameter size to enable it to fit. All of these are 4096, so I need to correct that. Except for Gemma 327, that Q4 not able to fit in there effectively, even though there did appear to be enough room. And if we check this here, we can see that we hit 19.79 and 16. But let's go ahead and see how it handles Armageddon with a twist. And it looks like it's keeping pace pretty good here. So we'll see as it continues on. You can see it kind of grow there a little bit, like I was mentioning. Eventually it stops growing for the most part. And that is just probably why you need to continually be in a new window for most of the LLMs out there, to continue the conversation after you run out of context. Yeah, and that is actually really good. That was 19.67 response tokens per second, prompt tokens per second, 1,012. And we're going to download Mistral Small 3.1. That's just out, and also Deepcoder Preview. Those are 14B and a 24B model. All right, let's load up Mistral now. Oh, darn. That is not very close, and we definitely saw pretty big impact on the response tokens per second as a result of that. So just the warm up there was at 2.5 response tokens per second on Mistral. But yeah, seeing that at 16 and 84. And yeah, you can see this is something's amiss here. Definitely got a bug in Mistral or something going on here. You'll get a lot of that if you're trying to catch the latest and greatest cutting edge stuff out there. So seeing that one of these GPUs is loaded up and the other is not loaded at all definitely indicates to me that we've got some sort of a problem that we did not have with the other models out there. So that makes any results we would get from Mistral just kind of moot. So I guess the best thing I can do is just move on to Deepcoder and not let it impact us at the moment. You want to load things into your GPUs and have 100% GPU utilization. It'll give you responses that are nice and snappy like that, where we just saw 17.8 and 7.8 come back on Deepcoder 14B Q8. And you can look over here and see that we're about 71% or 72% of the GPU utilized. This is actually really cool because this would allow you to go quite a bit larger with your context window, which especially for code work, you definitely want to do that at any rate. But we're really just testing the kind of performance of it in a consistent fashion so people could see what they could expect. And yeah, you know, this one I think pretty cool since it's a thinking tune that we can maybe get some decent answers out of it, especially for code tasks. That probably helps out a little bit. I'm not sure how it's going to do as a general chat agent, especially being billed as Deepcoder. I would expect that it's pretty much optimized for coding tasks. But it does look like it's performing at a pretty decent tokens per second and keeping pace. And we can see that we got back 17 response tokens per second, 1,654 prompt tokens per second though. And that looks like we're seeing right around 71%. And for Cogito, we saw 55% broken. And Gemma 3 12B Q8, what did we see when that one was loaded up? Let's go back and give that one more chance here. I think we got right around 19.6 response tokens per second and about 340 prompt tokens per second. And the VRAM we're observing here, I'd call that about 60% total being utilized. So that gives us a pretty good idea of some of the best that you would be able to run fully in VRAM. And these are all very, very new. So these have all come out like really recently. And once you start doing this, there's so much. And Ollama is really your gateway drug. It's super simple, makes things easy. They are deploying a new engine themselves. So a lot of stuff is getting fixed and getting better under the hood. But there has been recently, as a result of their new engine runner thing that they're developing, some hiccups. So things have been a little bit slower to get out the door, but I think that we'll see that pick back up here pretty shortly. But you can see like Deepcoder, Mistral, Cogito, these are all incredibly recent. Gemma 3 really is the strongest one that's out there in this class and size. And so even when we're looking over here at the kind of analysis of it, you can see that we got pretty good amount of VRAM utilization. Of course, you want to push it further than this and get it into the 90s if you can, ideally, and also give yourself, you know, that extra context window length. So there are some of the models that you could run. I did make a switch, and there is another surprise video that'll be coming out. So make sure you hit like and subscribe because we've got more coming on specifically the performance of this system. So Z440 getting 2 videos because there's something interesting I found, and I think you're going to find it pretty interesting also. So taking a look real quick here at the $750 AI system. So this is really under $750 if you were to, of course, go with just the things that came with it. So you don't have to buy any RAM if it comes with RAM. Most of the systems out there come with some sort of RAM. So that could be a potential to have, well, if you put that at zero, $30 taken off. $250 does look like the price point for 3060 12 gigabytes on eBay right now. It does not look like that price point on Amazon right now. So do keep in mind that is $500 when you're looking at two of those. I put in a 500 gigabyte here, and that is a very small, if you are seriously, wanting to tinker around and have fun, get a 1 terabyte at least SSD. It'll make things a lot funner for you. You can download a lot more stuff. And especially, you saw the Proxmox helper script site that is linked in the comments below, the description below. That is an excellent place where you will absolutely be able to find so many things that make it really quick to get up and running. But yeah, the total of this system is actually surprisingly under $750. Now, of course, that could change, inflation, who knows what. I mean, the base Z440s with a CPU and usually with 16 gigs of RAM are somewhere around $100. That usually does not include any sort of an SSD. So you definitely should, probably set aside between $30 and $50 if you're going to get a 1 terabyte SSD. Excellent way to spend extra money, but you should be looking at actually around $650. Now, of course, there's going to be taxes, and most of the $100 ones are actually free shipping, but that does bring, at this price point, our price per gigabyte of VRAM to $26.25, which is incredibly low compared to so many other systems out there. So really, this is pretty cool. And we're going to see some even cooler capabilities that the same system has, which I think we're going to be surprised. So yeah, you're going to get a back-to-back video on this Z440. So there you have it. This is a pretty awesome little system, and it can expand out to do quite a lot, even supporting up to 22 core processors. We're going to see some pretty cool stuff in just a couple more hours, I have a feeling, maybe tomorrow. But very soon after this video is out, a second Z440 video is going to be dropping. And I've got some really interesting things that I have to test out a little bit more, but I am very excited to show you some of that also. So there you have it, the HP Z440. Around or under $750, definitely under if you have any extra parts, and also if you are just buying the Z440 itself and the 3060 12 gigabytes. Certainly a lot of people would think to themselves, hey, how else could I get 24 gigabytes? And there are other ways. However, this is one of the cheapest ways to get there. And for something that runs in a system that is idling at about 65 watts and peaks up at about 190 watts, that's not too bad. And that really does have me feeling like this is a pretty decent, and I definitely know this from other experience, this is just a really good home lab unit. These are well known for their reliability. Having 8 DIMM slots is pretty crazy. You don't get that in many things. And so when you really load that up, you've got a lot of RAM, and you can run a infinite amount almost of VMs. Usually RAM's going to be the thing that gives out first. And the wide variety of CPUs, even the E5 2600 series being functional in here, that's pretty crazy. So yeah, I hope you've had a good time checking out this video with me. And yeah, I think there's some cool stuff that you're going to see tomorrow. I'll have a link to all of this stuff, the build guide. I've got the statistics I'm putting over on the website article, all of that linked in the description below. Also, drop your comment. Make sure you toss a thumbs up if you like this kind of content. And if you're interested, hit that subscribe button, and you can even ring the bell so you get notified when I drop content like this. Do make sure you check out the history, sort it by the newest, and make sure that if there is a more recent Proxmox LXC, or maybe even Docker guide, if you want to go that route, I will be working on a new Docker guide. I'm going to try to make LXC release and Docker release happen kind of at the same time, because Docker is making a lot of really new advancements. In just the past couple days, it's been announced some of their initiatives. So I don't want to drop supporting Docker, because I think there's going to be room in the same machine for both of these to run, because inside an LXC, Docker can run inside an LXC just perfectly fine. You're going to have a capability to share your most valuable resource, GPUs, which of course saves you a lot of money. You can share those not just with other AI applications, but with all sorts of other virtual machines and services. Like I mentioned, Proxmox Helper Scripts website in the description below. A wonderful place to begin your home labbing experience. And make sure to let me know what your projects are that you're working on. And yeah, I think this is pretty exciting. And like I've dropped a couple of times this hint, make sure that you have rung the bell if you're interested in this machine in particular, and also ridiculousness. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will check you out next time.